this mental caliber that is being looked at is a very how to work in a team, understand, analyze issues. I would broadly put them into 4 categories based on the depth. I think it goes by how much the board wants to know, how much more they want to know.
Hello and welcome to Rouse IAS. Today we have with us Miss Aradhana Johri, an retired IAS officer from 1980 batch who has served for 36 illustrious years in civil services. Mrs. Aradhana is a UP cadre officer, and during her service she served in UP government and in Government of India and held many important portfolios to include health, industries, dairies, social welfare. Mrs. Aradhana was Secretary of Disinvestment in Ministry of Finance and then subsequently in the Department of Pharmaceutical. After retirement, Ms. Aradhana was nominated as Administrative Member of CAT Principal Bench in Delhi. Today she is here with us. She is part of Rouse mock interview program as one of the panel members, and we'll be talking to her about the personality test of civil services exam. Thank you for coming to Rouse, ma'am.
Thank you for having me here.
To start the conversation, ma'am, the UPSC in their notification which they take out, they talk about the personality test guidelines, and they use a word called mental caliber. Could you just share with us what is this mental caliber and how do we assess mental caliber?
This mental caliber that is being looked at is a very large and encompassing term. It's not just intellectual capability per se, it goes beyond that. So it includes presence of mind, problem-solving approach, how to work in a team, how to understand, analyze issues, and most of all, integrity. Not just moral, but intellectual. Integrity of the mind, integrity of thought.
All right. During the personality test, which is commonly called as interview in casual parlance, the board will ask a candidate many types of questions. How would you broadly categorize these questions?
Well, these questions can be categorized. I would broadly put them into 4 categories. First of all would be based on the depth of the candidate. Secondly, there would be questions which are factual questions, which would be largely current affairs, etc. Thirdly, there would be questions which are opinion-based, eliciting the opinion of the candidate. And fourthly, there would be situational questions.
All right. And is there any standard format, ma'am? They have to ask all these kinds of questions, or it is play by the ear kind of thing that some people get asked more opinion-based questions, some get asked more factual?
I think it goes by how much the board wants to know, how much more they want to know about a candidate. Somebody's interview may take 20 minutes, somebody's may take 45 minutes. So there's really no hard and fast. And I'll just give you some examples of these questions because ultimately it's a personality test. So how best the board assesses the personality, on that basis only they'll be asking different questions. For example, question on the DAF. It is expected that a candidate would be knowing everything about and be interested enough to know everything about his biodata, be it his place of birth, be it his work ex, be it his college or school subject matter, or be it his hobbies and area of interest. So this is one. If you have something unique in your DAF, you can be sure you'll be asked a question on it. Like for example, I used to do sawdust painting. The first question was, what are the techniques of sawdust painting? Okay. So, it depends on the candidate.
Right.
Now, the second would be the current affairs, the factual questions. I'll just give an example. For example, I'm just taking, say, the Ukraine issue. It's so alive today. So a typical factual question would be, what are the aspects of it? It could be talking about leading to strategic alliances, NATO, oil, etc., etc. Then, on the same subject, if we go further to opinion, what should India's policy be towards this Ukraine issue? Does India gain or lose, etc.? And lastly, situational. Supposing you were the head of the mission in Ukraine, how would you evacuate Indian students? Or how would you handle the situation? How would you try to become interlocutor, etc.? Similarly, they can be on COVID or they can be on law and order. If you are a district magistrate in a place where the farmer agitation is taking place. So this is the kind of questions that would come. And how many questions are asked or on what variety of topics they ask depends on how the candidate has been already assessed.
All right. You mentioned also about the opinion-based questions. Now, these are the very tricky kinds where people get stuck, So, would you like to give some examples of this also, ma'am? What kind?
First of all, it is expected that a person who is an aspirant for the civil services should be able to be aware of what is happening around, should be able to understand and absorb issues, should be able to analyze issues, and should be able to form a cogent opinion, should be aware of the pros and cons of a matter and reach a balanced position, whatever that position may be. So, an opinion-based question could be, say, you could be assessing, or, in your opinion, is the Ukraine issue an opportunity for India, or is it not an opportunity? Is it a threat for India? Or it could be anything. It could be on health issues. It could be on the budget. It could be anything. What is your opinion? Could the government have put in more agriculture, or could it have put in more on defense or something like that? So opinion-based questions you are expected to answer with reasons. It's not just I reached that conclusion.
Some rational, some logic.
Because if I were in the interview board, I would give a lot of importance to that, because that is really bringing out the personality and the thinking of a candidate.
All right. We'll come to this important aspect again later in our talk, ma'am. You mentioned about current affairs being, is an important component of the interview. Now, we also find that most of the candidates are very overly concerned about current affairs and their focus is only on current affairs. Is it the case of missing the woods for the trees?
Not really. In fact, to use your metaphor, I would say current affairs is definitely the trees and the tree of life. Because if a person is not, how can a person be a leader if he is not aware of what is happening around him? In his own society, in his region, in his country, in the world. If he's not aware of what is happening, then how can he be a leader? So I really think that is most important. And then that's a starting point. As I mentioned earlier, current affairs knowledge, and then after that analysis and opinions. They all start from there.
All right. So current affairs does play an important role in
yes, certainly.
Okay. So one needs to keep abreast with the national developments and international developments what are there.
Completely.
Yeah. And most often we hear that on the day of the interview, some of the candidates do get asked the question, did you read today's newspaper and what was the front headline or what was there on the third page of the newspaper?
Yes, of course. I did. I got asked. And a lot of candidates, they say we didn't have time to read the paper. Yeah. So it's not important in the personality test to mug up something, this, that, and the other. It is more important to relax at that point of time. It is more important to be alert at that point of time. It's more important to be abreast.
Ma'am, I find a slight dichotomy in the entire process of personality test. As the name suggests, it is personality test and it is not a knowledge test, which is a very cliched statement. People keep saying this very often. Now, the type of questions which get asked by the board, they give an impression they are testing your knowledge.
See, first of all, a personality you cannot be doing a psychological test over there. A personality cannot be tested in a vacuum. It has to be based on certain aspects being asked and answered. And what is it ultimately that is really asked in the personality test? There are questions on DAF, which is your own area of interest. It is your own biodata, it's the candidate's own, and current affairs largely. This is what is, or their subject matter. And they don't get asked directly. Like, for example, in my interview, I'm a history student. The question asked of me was, name 3 great men in history who changed the destiny of a country to which they didn't belong. Oh. It's not a straight out question.
Yes.
You can say it's a knowledge question. No, it's a presence of mind question. Fortunately, I was able to think up. I didn't think up all 3 the interview person wanted, but I thought I'm good enough. So it's your presence of mind. It's your depth and range of interests. Like if you write a hobby, then you must know all about it. Even if you say I'm fond of cooking, you want to show your personality as a very liberal sort of a personality, then you may be asked how to prepare a certain dish to write down 2 global cuisines. So what is being tested is your depth, your range of interests, your overall awareness, your involvement, not the superficial involvement, but your genuine involvement and understanding of areas which are your own areas.
And what are these personality attributes which are being assessed by the board, and which of these are most critical? I mean, which are kind of non-negotiable?
I did mention the beginning, but first of all, I think intellectual capability, yes, is important, very important. Then there is also presence of mind and a problem-solving approach, ability to work in a team, and to lead from the front, and of course, integrity. I think these are questions which are really attributes which the UPSC is looking for, because they're looking for leaders.
All right. You mentioned initially, just about a few moments back, about the opinion-based questions. Now, we also find from the transcripts which are available subsequently after the interviews are over, the board tend to ask a lot of questions on contentious issues. Some of these issues could be dealing with the policies which are being implemented by the government of the day, and some candidates kind of tread the middle path on such issues, neither here nor there. So what is your opinion in case somebody is asked such questions? How does one handle
See,
this?
first of all, I do not think outright politically critical questions are asked. But yes, there can be contentious issues in the sense that there can be many ways of thinking on a particular issue, and I personally feel a candidate should have a balanced approach. He's entitled to his opinion because it's important to be truthful. Because if you're not truthful and honest, how can you be convincing?
Yeah.
And that is an attribute that is really important for a leader. But having said that, sometimes what happens is the board member has a different point of view. And I think it's perfectly all right to disagree with that viewpoint, but there should be some very cogent reasons for that. And it should be very politely, a disagreement should be very politely put across. And if the board member persists, then it should be that, sir, I'm sure that you, or ma'am, you have a very valid point. But for these reasons, I think this is what my opinion is. So I don't think the UPSC is looking for yes men. They're looking for people who have cogent reasons to form certain opinions, and they politely and firmly hold their own.
And do you think that sometimes the board members also do it intentionally to kind of push a candidate to see how much of courage of conviction he has, whether he changes his opinion under pressure?
Yes, why not? Of course. That is important. And to go further than that, sometimes, occasionally, a stress test does also get done. A question like that does come in, because ultimately they do want to know how you react under pressure, because true leadership shines in pressure.
That's true, ma'am. That's true. Now, we understand, ma'am, the personality attributes are kind of not a very short-term process, which in a short time you can make an attribute or develop a personality trait. They take time. You need to really invest in them. So there are a lot of candidates who are now aspiring and would be appearing for civil services exam who are watching us. What advice do you have for them? Because most of us, when we start our coaching or training, we start with theory, reading the themes and history and geography. But seldom I find anyone putting too much of some focus on the improvement of the personality attributes. So for such candidates, what advice do you have? Because once the PT is announced, and then this time is only about just few days or few weeks, it's difficult to kind of improve upon personality attributes. But if you start in the beginning, I feel that one is able to do some changes.
One cannot change one's personality completely, but one can certainly improve. I would say that at the point of time when one is taking the decision to write the exam, to take on the civil services, I think that is the time one has to start working on it. And I would say, first of all, a quick SWOT analysis has to be done by the candidate. What are my strengths which I can build on? What are my weaknesses which I need to overcome? And then start working on that. For instance, one of the things is that which is a very useful thing is that read the papers every day. And this is not just a personality thing. I'll come to the personality thing after that. Read the papers every day. Get out 30, 40 important topics. cull out all the facts on that, look at the pros, look at the cons, and form an opinion. This will get them into the habit of understanding an issue, understanding all aspects of an issue, and then reaching a conclusion or an opinion. So, this hones the personality tremendously. Another point that is asked is about oratory, speaking.
Yeah, that's right.
I would modify it a little bit in the sense that I would say that more important than oratory is communication, articulation, and communication. Oratory means I speak very eloquently. Communication means I listen very carefully to what the other person is saying. What does that person mean to say? Understanding that, and then maybe as a candidate, I should pause a moment, organize my thoughts, prioritize if there are 5 points to a reply, prioritize my 5 points, and then communicate lucidly and simply. So it's more improvement of communication rather than eloquence. But oration just reminds me. In fact, if you just want to become pure orator, there is this famous orator called Demosthenes. He's supposedly one of the most famous orators of all times. He lived in Alexander the Great and his father's Greece. So he was born with a stammer. So he would put pebbles in his mouth and stand on the seashore and talk to the waves loudly so that he could increase the volume and the way he spoke. He would practice in front of a mirror. He would also read up and all about orators before him, and he became one of the greatest orators of all times. I'm not saying everybody needs to do that, but you know, one thing that it's a very small little thing. A candidate can speak and record his speech, and then hear it and see. He may be talking too fast, so consciously he can slow down his speech. He may be talking indistinctly. Consciously he can make it more distinct. So these are little things that can be worked upon. But the lesson in the moral of the story is that this work has to start early. When the decision to write the exam is taken, at that point of time, itself preparation for the personality test begins, and not after the mains results are announced.
Physical bearing. How does a person look? How does he dress up? How does he enter the room? How much bearing does a physical appearance of a person or the way he carries himself is there in the interview, in making an impression on the board?
I think it has a lot of bearing. And I'm not talking about looks or beauty, but a neat appearance, a confident gait, erect position, a well modulated and moderated voice, and most of all, eye contact. Honesty comes out through eye contact.
Correct.
If I look you in the eye,
Yes,
I am showing my soul to you. At the same time, I'm able to read your thoughts and calibrate my response accordingly. So I think these things do matter a lot.
okay. So what suggestions do you have in somebody wants to appear confident? What should he or she do?
Take 3 breaths and say I'm the best. No, to be confident, you must know you must be prepared well in advance. I also agree that hard work is 99% of the battle won, and he must be well prepared. If he's well prepared, he'll be more confident, and then giving little attention to the details. I mean, this everyone knows that if you're wearing new clothes, please don't wear them the day of the interview. Get comfortable in what you wear. Ultimately, the person has to be comfortable and confident.
We are expecting the results of the main very soon, and once the results get announced, the candidates are taking mock interviews. Now, we have observed that, some of the candidates are just taking one mock after another, and then they get the feedback of the board, and then the ruckus starts, conflicting feedbacks, and then they don't have time to work on those feedback points. So, in your opinion, ma'am, how many mock interviews one should take?
I don't think a person should take too many.
Sorry
First
to
of all-
interject. What should be the aim of mock interview?
I was
That's-
coming to that.
Yes.
I was coming to that, exactly. That one should understand what is the aim of a mock interview. The aim of the mock interview is not to get questions from so many people and think that that is what is going to come in the actual interview. The idea is that one should understand and get an objective assessment of one's own position. What are my strengths? What are my weaknesses? I can hear from an experienced panel. Secondly, so that I can work upon those. Secondly, I should also be more comfortable facing the board. By fear of an interview, I should become more confident. It's a little practice. In terms of how many and what kind of thing, I think one, of course, should be taken reasonably early so that there's time to make amends, to time to address issues. And the second should be 4 weeks ideally, if there is time enough for the PT. It should be taken about 4 weeks after that, around 4 weeks. If at all a third is needed, all right. Otherwise, I think this should be quite enough. Because a lot time is also wasted in this, and the candidate ends up getting confused because feedback and assessment is very subjective. So if he gets thrown different kinds of assessments from all kinds of places, then it is very problematic. More important to choose your place more carefully.
Yes, that reminds me of one instance when I was interacting with a lady candidate post her mock interview with us at Rouse, and she was kind of little nervous, and I happened to ask her. She says in one of the mock interviews she was told that her haircut is not suitable for the interview.
Oh, mean.
Now, that's what. So, I mean, it's extremely important. The board should be wise enough to see how much time a candidate has to work on the feedback.
I think it's really, you've said an important point. It's really important to select how many you do and where you go. There are so many institutions mushrooming everywhere. So due diligence by a candidate is important. It should be a reputed institution, not a fly-by-night sort of an institution, because you are investing your precious time, you are investing your emotions, you are investing an opportunity there at that point of time.
Yeah.
So I also think that an institution which has a lot of experienced administrators backing it up, I think that's a good institution to go to, because administrators will not lend their names to an institution of ill repute or an institution that does not really deliver or perform. Secondly, also in the mock, if there's a seasoned, experienced administrator, they can give good feedback. Many of them would be having a similar background to many members of UPSC. So the way of thinking would be similar, and the kind of feedback that would go would really be helpful. So I think that this due diligence stage is really important for a candidate. Select one or at the most two places. Running all over the place is really counterproductive.
And the administrative infrastructure of an institute also matters, because we keep seeing the advertisements in the newspaper where the interviews are being held in 5-star hotels, where candidates.
Oh, I didn't know that.
Yes, that
Yes.
also happens.
Yes, of course.
So the ambience, the administrative support, the infrastructure, how close it is to the actual UPSC interview.
That reminds me of a story. There was a friend of mine who had to have a surgery of the eye. So there were two places he had to choose. And one of them was a bright young doctor who didn't have such a huge fancy infrastructure, but he had enough infrastructure. The other was a 5-star. So this gentleman, my friend, chose the 5-star. And after that, he had a problem. So I chose the other one. So he says, you didn't have? I said, no, I never had a problem. So he says, I had a problem. He says, you know what? The guy who operated was tall. He was behind a mask. And the guy whom I was supposed to be operating was short. So I said, why did you go there? It's a 5-star culture, but what you need is delivery of goods, not this fancy show business,
Yes, that's true.
So that's really important point.
So it's extremely important that you go choose an institute very, very carefully.
Correct.
Because the feedback is a double-edged sword. It could really bring down your confidence, and then you can get shaken up.
One thing I do want to add at this point of time, that it's really not an interview, it's a personality test. Candidates think that they must answer every question. So that is not expected. Nobody is expected to know everything. Sometimes questions are just thrown at them to see how they react in face of something they don't know. So how many questions you answer is not important. How well you answer the question that you answer is important. And if you can't answer questions, don't lose confidence. A war is never over, never lost till it's over. And I was mentioning the example of, look at this last Australian Open final. Rafael Nadal, he was 2 sets down, playing a younger opponent, and he came up and he won.
Yeah.
So that's a champion, and UPSC is looking for champions.
That's true.
But it's important to be truthful. They should not guess, they should not bluff, because that is the end of the road then. But it's a test of personality. Everybody is not expected to know everything.
And with their experience and age, they are able to see through a person very easily.
Of course. That's what is the job of the administrator, to assess people.
True. Okay, to sum up, ma'am, in the end, if I may ask you a very cliched question again, what are the do's and don'ts for a candidate who is preparing for personality test? Now results are about to be announced, and people know that how well they have done in the mains and whether somebody is going to make it into the personality test or not. So what should he do now?
I think we've discussed that in the course of this conversation we have had. Uh, First of all, he must get into the habit of reading newspapers. He must be reading them if he's not already doing it, a regular daily, and also an economic paper. He must read editorials because they will give him different points of view. He need not agree with them, but it will set forward his thinking. So that is one. Then he must be totally familiar, he or she must be totally familiar with their DAF. All kinds of questions will come up from there. And in the personality test itself, they should not be stressing and mugging at the last minute. They should be relaxed. They should look confident. They should feel confident. And I think half the battle is won in that only.
All right. Thank you very much, ma'am. It was a very enlightening and interesting talk. And thank you for taking out time and coming to Rouse with us.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.